All right, well, thank you for inviting me here today. I really like to enjoy sitting in the audience listening to really everyone talk, and especially enjoy hearing about the missing middle, because that's me. 2 years ago, I attended my first HPC conference and kept hearing this. We were trying to take our company into CFD at the time, and we kept hearing this missing middle discussion. And I think it took a day or so before we realized that was actually us. And so here we are 2 years later. We're successful in this space. And so we were asked to come today and just give some insight. First, who we are. I talk about our company really in three acts now. It used to be two, but we are a bicycle component manufacturer. We're almost 25 years old now. We're founded in 1989 by an ex-Formula One engineer, a real composites innovator. This guy was a true genius. He's still well known within the auto racing circles. We pretty much reinvented the way bicycles look. You see the bicycle in the top right-hand image there. That bicycle went to market in 1990. So you put your modern hat on. That would look pretty radical if I brought it to market today. One of the things we're very proud of is that bicycle, and about 20 different design features of that bicycle are today illegal in professional racing, as most of them are considered performance advantages. We kind of started a sort of arms race in cycling where by the '96 Olympics, the average bicycle on the track cost over $100,000. And the IOC stepped in to really crush that innovation. And so now we have to work within the box that they give us, and bicycles today at that level are probably in the $25,000 to $30,000 range, just to give you an idea. But by 1998, we were nearly out of business. Poor decisions had been made. Really, we just failed to progress the technology. I think the founder of the company became a little complacent, thought that he had something that couldn't be beaten, and customers want new. So 1999, the company was purchased, and that's when I joined. And we started really focusing on a couple of things. And one was, we wanted to own the wind tunnel. That, in my category, is like the one data point that is objective that links to performance, right? You have weight. Everybody fights on weight. Wind tunnel was an area that we could really go in and teach the customers about and really own that. And so we started, and we shot for owning the wind tunnel, data-driven enhancement. We wanted to get into the pro peloton because the professionals weren't using this stuff. It's a very sort of historically oriented sport. There's a lot of old timers around, and the old timers teach the newcomers, and a lot of the old ways are perpetuated. So as a result, a lot of the modern technology just was not making it into the professional ranks. And then we also wanted to shoot for 12-month or faster design cycles. Now, in the process, we sort of accidentally on purpose completely changed our industry and our market. You guys have, I'm sure, all seen the sort of customer response curve. It's, your early adopters on the far left, your early and late majority, and your laggards. One of the things we found ourselves with in 1999, we were a 16-employee company. We had a $1,000 wheel set, essentially one wheel set. And what conventional wisdom was, well, you're too expensive, and you need to come down market, right? You need to catch the early and late majority by lowering the price and broadening the consumer base. But instead, we decided to go laterally while pushing the price point up and getting really specific with features for different users. And so we identified what a triathlete wanted, what a track cyclist wanted, what a time trial racer wanted, all the different aspects or types of cycling. We became very targeted, and as we did that, we put the price higher and higher each year. 2004, we found ourselves with 70 employees, $1,600 wheel set, but we had 5 options at that price range. By 2012, we were 250 employees. Our average wheel set cost, or really our entry point, is $2,700 for a set of bicycle wheels. So I talked to groups all over the world about sporting federations and things like that, and people always just look at me and say, you charge how much For what? What do you do? We found ourselves suddenly hitting the real central meat of the customer. I mean, I think it was as much a surprise to me as anyone else that we found ourselves here, starting in 1999, we're a $500,000 company. By 2012, we find ourselves as about a $60 million company. We hit the meat of the market by selling them very highly specialized product. Now, one of the things that, and why I call this accidentally on purpose, was it turns out it's not about the cost, right? People are willing to pay. Money is not the barrier to entry. It's about usability, and it's about specificity, right? The customer needs to be able to look at that and say, okay, that speaks to me, and I need that, and I trust that it's going to work, right? One of the things we changed here is that way back, people used to build wheels. And so in 2000, we decided, well, why don't we build the wheels? Instead of having your bike shop, instead of you buying the part, I'll build the part. And then we started working on simplifying processes like the tires. High-end racing tires are glued on. And people don't necessarily know that they're handmade, often from silk. Good racing tire for bicycle can cost upwards of $300. You flat it and it's done. So, I mean, it's a big investment. But the gluing is, again, the barrier to entry. I'll spend the $300. I don't want to glue it. 3-4 hours in your garage. It's smelly. It's sticky. Well, so we start working, well, let's make high-end wheels that work with more traditional tires. And then we had to go to the tire manufacturers and convince them to make higher and higher-end tires that would work at this level, low rolling resistance, grip, all of the key performance criteria. But one of the things we really discovered, and I preached to my team today, is, you can't get the early and late majority if you don't own the innovators and the early adopters, right? Selling to the early and late majority doesn't work because they don't listen to you, they listen to the early adopters and the innovators. So your early adopters and innovators have great power, right? They're great influencers. And if you can identify the innovators and the early adopters who are evangelical in their personalities, there's not a ton of them out there, but they do exist, they cultivate followers. If everyone probably familiar with LinkedIn or Facebook for sure, but you'll notice on LinkedIn, there's people who have thousands of contacts, and then there's people who have thousands of contacts who actually have a following. They're posting things and people are reposting it or retweeting it. Those are the influencers, and they're the really critical ones because they sell the stuff in the middle. And here we are in a space where today there's over 120 carbon wheel brands in our industry. And we continue to lead and own that space. And one of the things that I think I'm most proud of is, we're all about product and we're all about technology. We're all about customer service. Companies coming in are always coming in trying to come way under on price. And it's a struggle. And it's a struggle because it's not about the price. And so that's one of the things when I talk to the companies that were involved in the project that we'll talk about now, is how I think there tends to be this sort of fixation on this stuff is really expensive. And even for a company our size, it is really expensive. But that's not the barrier. And so we had our first two acts, and now we're moving into what I call Act 3, which is beyond the wind tunnel. And I needed a slide to show some of our really cool CFD photos. But we're in a space today where future product will be developed digitally. And we're already into the mode of where we're really focusing on system interactions over individual components. I think that's become a real calling card of our company is, okay, yeah, now there's 10 companies who want to talk to you about wheels, but I want to talk to you about wheel interactions. I want to talk about handling, stability. I want to talk to you about things that the other guys aren't talking about. And I can talk to you about it at an incredibly high level because we're leading with our development technologies. So I'm up here today because I was recommended by Steve Legensky of Intelligent Light, and he said, how did we get here? Sort of a fortuity, one of my favorite words, that back in October through December of 2008, we had a project called Columbus, underway at the wind tunnel. We were basically investing about 200 hours of wind tunnel looking at the future of bicycle wheels and how they interacted on different frames. Wind tunnel, again, is something we're very well versed in. I probably have 1,200 plus hours in the wind tunnel personally. Amongst my team, we probably have 10,000 hours. When you consider that it's like watching paint dry or like watching a computer process. It's terribly boring. But you do learn a lot. And we're in there, and we're banging our heads against the wall because we're just not improving. 100 hours rolls past, and we're 1% better. My customer they're not going to trade in last year's wheels for this year's wheels for 1%. They're just not. That works when you're Boeing, and 1% over the life of an airplane is a whole lot of fuel. That doesn't work in the consumer space. January 2009, Matt Gatto and Steve Legensky present a paper at the AIAA conference where Matt had, in trying to show off what their software could do and really try to make a point from their perspective, he decided to model bicycle wheels, and he happened to own our wheels and ride them. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, I think we had actually made a marketing claim that he wanted to disprove.
Negative drag.
Yeah, at the outset. So we had a disc wheel that made negative drag. Essentially, the wheel acts like a sail, and at certain wind angles will actually generate forward propulsion. And so Matt had seen this and said, oh, that's BS. And I'm going to show them that I'm going to prove they're wrong with CFD. So within a few months of each other, we have these two things happening, and we see this paper, and I'm sitting with my head genius, Michael Hall, and we read this, we print the paper, we read it off, we're both just in awe of what he's doing, and Michael looks at me and says, we've just invented the future. And he's he's a real character. But I think in that moment, we knew we were right. And one of the things that we had seen in there was that a lot of these factors, the wind tunnel, we look at drag, we look at side force. Well, we have a 3-axis balance in the wind tunnel. It gives us drag, side force, and lift. I don't care about lift because I'm not making an aircraft. Things that control handling, other features of how the wheel rides, what it feels like, we can't even measure that, right? None of the wind tunnels that do bicycle work measure that today. And suddenly we saw some graphics like this in Matt's paper where we realized we could visualize things that we didn't even know existed. So we start thinking, well, what can we do with this? If we can measure it, we can work to minimize it. So, okay, instead of just having a side force data point in a wind tunnel graph, let's actually work at minimizing that value. Well, let's look at steering torque. If the front wheel of a bicycle is influenced by the wind, and the faster I make a wheel, the more lift it creates, the harder it is to ride. I think our industry had just accepted that as a fact and tried to live with it. And in Matt's paper, we saw the future. This quite literally was the future of, well, if we could find that force distribution around the rim, we could model the center of pressure accurately, and then we could play with parameters to see how we move it, and then we can move it to where we want to move it. Now, somewhere in here, we have to start sort of writing the science handbook, because there's questions like, well, where do you want to move it to? This is pretty groundbreaking stuff. There's no handbook on what's good and what's bad, and so a lot of other technologies start to come in. Rapid prototyping technologies were advancing, and this was quite exciting that to prove this point, we printed our first 3D printed metal wheels that were rideable. And so we could actually model it for one center of pressure, print that wheel, build it up, and send a guy out on it to ride it, and then have him come back. What did it feel like? This was really groundbreaking stuff. And then we saw this. And it was sort of this massive revelation that, okay, well, not only are we modeling things like center of pressure and drag distribution, but they move. As a wind tunnel guy, with an auto racing background and composites background and all of these things, and coming from auto racing, every wind tunnel works the same way. Has anyone ever been to a wind tunnel? Oh, we have quite a few. Okay, so one of the first things you do when you get to the wind tunnel is you talk with the folks that work there about how you're going to collect your data. What frequency for how long to get your data point? The smack in the face here was this realization that by our own language, we were closing our eyes to 90% of the data. We were saying data point. It's data range. And then the question became, well, if it moves, how do we make it move less? And what's good? Let's define what's bad, then let's define how to make it better. And then we started looking at, well, why is it moving? And we realized we have a shedding problem. You can't quite see it here in the way it prints up there, but these are get that to run again. This was really groundbreaking stuff, 3 years ago for us. And so we started coming up with the realization that what the rider referred to as buffeting in the wind is essentially the way the wheel wants to destabilize underneath you. It has a bit of a vibration to it. Riders call that buffeting. That's a shedding frequency. In hindsight, this is totally obvious. At the time, it was, we've been doing this for a whole career and nobody thought of it. And then we started looking at, okay, well, now we have a parameter. Well, if we can push that frequency higher and reduce the amplitude, then the buffeting thing goes away. And so from this, we developed the technology we call Firecrest, which is a zero steering input. That's how we sell it to our customers. And there's 3 legs to the stool. Minimize the side force, right? Eliminate the wind-induced torque, that's by moving the center of pressure, and reduce the effects of the vortex shedding. So minimizing the side force, that's a direct function of the side surface area. So in the old thinking, we said, well, we can't change that. A wheel so deep has so much surface area. Deeper wheels get faster. The deeper you want to ride, the harder it is to control that wheel. That's how it works. So we didn't think we could change it. Well, the wind-induced torque wasn't measurable at the time in any of the wind tunnels that did bicycle. So nobody was even thinking about it. And then the effects of the vortex shedding, we weren't measuring. It was there all along, but we weren't measuring it. And so in developing this product and telling this story, Triathlete Magazine, the editor of Triathlete Magazine, I think made a really beautiful point when he said, Firecrest defined and solved the problem before anyone else even realized the problem existed. I mean, that was the sort of massive leap in the technology here. We came to market with the problem statement and a solution for that, and the other guys were standing completely flat-footed, unaware that the problem was even a problem, or that you could even do anything about it. And so we went back and said, we've got to push this in our workflow, right? Here's how it had been forever. We've got to change. And so the thought was, how do we put the CFD in to where we can go CAD to CFD and take what was typically, I'll do $150,000 to $200,000 a year at the wind tunnel. In tunnel time, we'll probably do another $250,000 in prototypes. Well, those prototypes, if I take 100 prototypes a year, those are my 100 best ideas. They're probably culled down from maybe 200 ideas. But how do we get from 200 to 100? Well, intuition, right? That's the sort of hand-waving magic that goes on in the background. Oh, this feels like it'll work. And some of them you just let be darts at the wall. Well, that's crazy. Let's try that. But you throw a lot of stuff out for no reason other than you can't test it. So the thought here was, okay, how do I get 1,000 ideas down to my 100? And then, of course, how do we rapidly get that into production and make a whole lot of money out of it? So that's the Firecrest story, as we've told it over and over. It did tremendous things for our business. We added over 100 manufacturing jobs, massive increase in sales, and we just completely changed the market. The interesting story behind this story is CFD didn't create or lead to Firecrest at all. Okay, Firecrest was a shape that Michael had come up with beforehand. The interesting thing about this story was the CFD really pointed out to us that what we thought was just a pretty fast wheel in the wind tunnel wasn't fast, but solved the steering torque thing. It solved the frequency shedding problem. So it changed the way we thought about the wheel. And it was so good, or the CFD told us that it was so much better than we even thought it was, that we at the last minute chose to completely retool a project we were about to launch. So we retooled about $250,000 in tooling in about 8 weeks to make our product launch, because it was so good we had no choice. So I think the irony of the story is we eventually, maybe a year or two later, would have launched a Firecrest project in a world without CFD, but we would have launched it as just another really fast wheel. So as I joke, HPC ended up costing me a lot of money, and it was good. How good? So just keep putting, so very good. Even my favorite is the top quote there comes from a German magazine, and the German magazines tend to always have test winners that are German brands, and they're never fans of us so much. I think our best result in one of their product tests was like a 12th place. We've now won that test 4 years in a row. We won Tours Meilenstein, which is their milestone award. It's probably the most prestigious product development award in the cycling industry. And then at the bottom, my favorite ever quote, which is, I've never used the word best in a product review. That changed after my first ride on Firecrest. I can say without a doubt, these are the best all-around wheels I've ever tested. Now, one of the things that's so great about this is, had we gone to market with Firecrest and it was just another fast wheel, I think these quotes would be different, right? A lot of what these people feel and think and believe and know when they ride that wheel, they know and feel and think and believe because we told them that that's what it was doing. And we showed them those really awesome, beautiful pictures and movies that really cemented in their minds that that's what they were feeling. So it really is a game changer for all of us. For us internally, it caused some real inward looking. Wow, there's a whole lot of data that we're not looking at or not thinking about. From the perspective of our industry, this product has changed everything. I mean, everything. Every single major wheel competitor in the market today has to talk about stability and handling because they have to. You look back 3 years, not a word. No one talked about it. So the real problem was, okay, how do we repeat that? From those of you on the design side of things know, okay, wow, it's, when you're in the game of constantly having to one-up yourself, how do you one-up the greatest thing you've ever done? And so that's what brings us to the project that we are presenting today, which is Intel helped with funding, and it was actually executed by the Intelligent Light Advanced Research Group. And the goal was, okay, how do we take the very advanced level, PhD level stuff that Matt Gatto was doing and actually kind of weaponize that into something that a company like ours can actually use at our scale. And so Intelligent Light helped by bringing in themselves, obviously, CD Adapco, our systems, Intel to help on the hardware side. And the goal was, okay, how do we get this in place where I can use this technology without hiring a PhD, right? Without bringing in HPC experts, without doing all of these things that I think these very large companies do when they come into this space. Because, quite frankly, we don't have the time or the money or the interest. In a lot of ways, I like to joke with the guys that, for me, this is fascinating, but at the end of the day, I want to treat it as a black box, right? I've got to know my market and the sales channels and distribution and composite. We do all of our own manufacturing, so we know composites. And I want this to be a black box that just outputs awesomeness, right? I want to throw ideas at it and have it tell me things that are fantastic. I don't really care what's in there. So how do we get hundreds or thousands of designs down to smaller numbers, and how do we run them with one of the things we learned, we need unsteady physics, right? And then we have other issues like we have an IT department, and as you guys, who hopefully there aren't too many IT guys in the room, know that's an issue, right? It's whatever you want to do, they want you to not do that. And so, things like, well, can't you do this in Word or Excel? Well, no, we can't do that in Word or Excel. You'll notice the Mac, which causes some trouble at times. There's my advanced research group all runs Mac because the IT guys won't touch them. And so we buy Mac on our company credit cards and we dual boot them with Windows, and the IT guys never show up. I swear to God, it's the only way to get stuff done. But it highlights a problem. We come to this in our IT department. We only run Windows. No Linux. No way. Can't do it. Won't happen. So you see the hurdles are going to be many. And then, of course, how do we post-process all the results critically, skeptically, get them visualized in a way that I don't need full-time people who just look at data, right? These are small and medium-sized company problems. Okay, I don't want to hire guys to pre-process and run this stuff full-time. I don't want to hire guys to have to crunch the data full-time. I want to just put stuff in, I want to get stuff out, and I want it to point me in some directions so we can move forward. And so what we developed is called YARD, yet another RIM design. And so the goal was, how do we throw CAD parts in, use JavaScripting to essentially create the runs within the star CCM environment, and then FEX scripts for field view to basically post-process and then spit back to us what we're interested in so we can throw away all the other stuff. So from a best practices perspective, you can read it, but we basically have, we throw our CAD models in, hit run, and it does all the other stuff. Okay, and this is where I think the power of the HPC for companies my size becomes really amazing. I create the CAD, we put it in a queue, the software looks to the queue, when it runs the yard, it grabs the next rim, hub, spokes, whatever we're running, we can put a fork, we can put a bicycle in there, and it just starts going. And so you can sit there and, I think everybody the first time they see it wants to watch it, and then they realize it's going to take 2 hours to mesh, and eventually it gets pretty boring. But it builds the environment, it builds the model, and then it just churns away on meshing. Then it runs itself. Then it saves itself. At the end of a RAN solution, we can convert to DES or unsteady RANs, and we can continue to run that. And so what the team created for us is this sort of amazing couple of scripts. I mean, really tiny little pieces of code. I say tiny because I didn't have to write them. That, looks at a parts manifest, runs the Java, throws it in, runs through, and all I had to do was create the CAD part. So you can imagine, I'm really loving this because this is the beginning of how we sort of democratize CFD within our company. The way it's been up until now has been we've got a couple of aero guys from auto racing and myself who come up with the ideas. I have 25 engineers on staff. A lot of them are, production manufacturing engineers, composites engineers, and we have all, we have folks from everywhere. Well, I want them to come up with ideas too. But they're busy with other things, so they're not sitting in the meetings in the old world. They're not sitting in the meetings talking about new ideas to try. But what these guys can do today that is so cool is they can sit at their desk, open a SolidWorks environment. We have a start part. They can draw a simple rim cross-section, revolve it, throw it in the queue, and their stuff will be run right alongside that of the experts. And one of the most exciting things about this, each idea gets run through a full yaw sweep, all the data is kicked out, and those guys can actually see the results of their idea. And sometimes those ideas are really terrible. And sometimes those ideas have been impressively good. And as those of you with aero backgrounds know, a lot of the most fascinating stuff you see is in the really bad ideas, right? The good stuff is sort of straightforward, but man, that was really bad in a really unexpected way. And that's the stuff you want to go deeper in. And the power there is really in this post-processing part, right? So we start field view, we run all this back out, and essentially create some plots, some CSV files, show here, that can be read directly into Excel or we have an internal wind tunnel database. It's the last 13 years of our company's wind tunnel history is in an intranet that you can access anywhere in the world, just VPN in. And so I can now VPN in and graph CFD part data right alongside actual wind tunnel data. So suddenly, from a decision-making perspective, this just doubled or tripled in power. We can look at, remember that idea we had that looked kind of like this thing, and and you pull it up, and you can run through and actually see what that data was, and all at a very, very small cost. We're talking in the not even kilobyte level. On the stuff that's good, from the raw ideas and RANs, we go to DES, which, as you know, or those of you who aren't in CFD, DS is an unsteady physics. It's transient. You're solving by time step. These are big, big files. Terabyte plus per yaw angle, and we study 7 yaw angles per wheel. So, this is where the big data thing starts to become a big problem. And this is where, the solution that FieldView's worked for us is really amazing. That it creates and writes these XDBs, which are extract databases. And these come back to us. Really what we want out of the DES is the data and some pretty pictures to show our customers or our potential customers. This is really an amazing way to take what are terabytes and terabytes of data, condense it into something that's really easy to manage, and toss the rest. And this also is really where I think what separated our company from the 3 or 4 other companies in our industry who are now starting to get into CFD or into this space, is that it's a lot of guys running the RANs physics, which is good, but this is real. Okay, this is actionable data. When we run a run here, the data that comes out of that it's matching wind tunnel within a few percent. Typically, maybe we have as much as 4 or 5%, but it's very good for our purposes. And so, all of that, what my guys end up having to do is just take the output from the field view. The CSV, XDBs, the JPEGs get thrown into, this is our internal, it's called Zetabase system. It will graph any run against any other run. It has all sorts of multifunctionality. You can search for the images. And the rest of it we trash. And as a result, the 2 to 4, up to 10 terabytes per run is living at less than 100 megabytes. And so one of the ways that we enforce this is we have a 20 terabyte storage system for this, and that's all they get. So I tell the guys, you can do whatever you want, but if you fill it up, it's full. And so we laugh about the way smaller companies solve problems relative to bigger companies. You say, well, if you don't want a big data problem, just don't give them enough space to store it, right? It's like when you have a factory, and I have now a 70,000 square foot of manufacturing space, and you don't put flat surfaces in a factory, right? It was a great lesson I learned when I was a young and stupid engineer, that I wanted to work in the back, and so I went and got like a small table so I could bring my laptop back there and work. Well, by the second day, you walk back there, and it's piled, 3 foot high with crap that you've never seen before, and no one can identify. Well, what is this? Oh, I've never seen it before. What's it do? We have no idea. Well, where did it come from? Not a clue. So that's my suggestion. 20 terabytes max. You guys can clean it up if you fill it up. And it's worked really well. So the payoff of this project today is we're creating a lot of big data. And we're condensing it, and we're throwing a lot of stuff away, and we're making lots of really pretty pictures and videos. Now, I haven't actually developed any earth-shattering product yet. We've only been at it for the last 6 months or so. But it's coming. And I think the excitement is there. I think especially the democratization aspect from my team is, I have guys who can barely speak up in a meeting when they have an opinion, manufacturing engineering types or One of them is, I'm a big believer in personality indexing for hiring, so I have a CAD guy, and he's an incredibly detail-oriented, antisocial personality. He's very hard to get a hello out of in the morning. When we look at the files, he's pumping a couple ideas a day into the queue, and some of them are really out there. I mean, really out there, interesting ideas that he never, we could waterboard the guy, we could pull the fingernails. He would not talk about them, right? He wouldn't speak up in a meeting if pressed, and he's secretly throwing stuff in there. And some of the stuff he's throwing in there is really cool. So that to me is one of the most exciting aspects of this. I think the next, the future Firecrest product, the future kind of game-changing product from us is probably going to come from the CAD guy, or someone who works in the factory, or someone who's just learning CAD. This is exciting stuff. So at the end of this, I want to put together some slides, just talking with, one of my questions was, what do you guys want to hear from me? Do you want to hear the truth of what I think about our experience? I think we have some interesting perspective. We built our company by selling to sort of the missing middle of our industry, and now we're on the consumer side of that. And I feel your pain in a lot of these areas. I also feel the pain of being the consumer, and in a lot of aspects of this project, it was painful being the consumer. But so first, are any missing middle companies here? Any of you? Okay, so just me. Well, what I would tell them is, you guys can do it. You really can do it, but you're going to need a lot of help. Okay? You don't need an army of PhDs, at least not on your staff. But you are going to need them at some point. I think one of the things that I struggle with sometimes, and I think all companies do, is tempering expectations and taking a holistic approach to the process. It's funny. One of the first, as we were getting into this, Matt Gatto kept saying, just settle down. We'll get there. These early, we were having all sorts of, he works in Linux and we work in Windows, and the IT guy couldn't get it installed, and it takes weeks, and then we get it, and the file architecture's completely wrong, and you need a // and all that stuff that I don't want to have to care about. You have to care about in that moment. And Matt, just kept saying, no, take the long view on this. This is going to be awesome. And then a few months later, we took our first batch of CFD ideas to the wind tunnel, and some of them were just terrible. And then it was me to say, no, take the long view on this. Don't worry about it. We all know how to do this. It's just sometimes difficult to apply. But don't convince yourself that the intern will be cranking out high-end simulation in a month. That's my personal long-term goal, but it's not going to happen quickly. And I think, and this becomes a selling point for those of you selling to the missing middle, but I think this really the risk needs to be viewed from the side of not acting. When I pitched this ultimately to my management, quite honestly, well into the project, I don't think they knew because we were on Mac at the time. But by the time I pitched it to them, I remember saying, I think there's going to be two types of companies in the future. There's the guys who are on board with this and changing everything, and there's going to be the guys who aren't around anymore. And I think within our industry, you're already starting to see this movement. I mean, we've kind of opened the door and held it open with our foot, and companies are running in. And they're all over the map with their level of execution. But in the last 3 years, 4 major bike brands have stepped onto the playing field at a pretty high level of CFD, and a lot of guys are coming behind them. So random word hanging out there. So for you hardware, software, and service providers, I think one of the problems is the missing middle doesn't know you guys exist, quite frankly. I certainly didn't. I mean, I had been looking actively at CFD since 2001, really having no luck getting anywhere. The companies you could get to talk to you or have some interest would be, oh yeah, well, you can go here and download a demo. Like, I'm really going to get somewhere with that. I think there's not just a perception problem, but just a recognition problem. People, big data is the big word, or the big phrase that we talk about, but people don't know HPC, and people have no concept of that this is going on outside of a really small circle. IT doesn't want you to exist. As I joke with my IT guy, who I love dearly, and I give him a lot of crap, IT is a fiefdom fixated on defending the castle, right? IT doesn't want to look over here and see that you're building a spaceship, okay? So I think there's an inherent sort of a disconnect there, that everything that, certainly everything I brought to them in this project was looked at, I would say, very poorly, and with great skepticism, and from the aspect of, okay, well, how vulnerable are we going to be? Oh, this is going to get us hacked. This is going to be this. Even to the point of one of our junior IT people had made a very funny comment of, this is part of that cloud thing, and that's very dangerous. Say, I think the whole world is on that cloud thing. And I don't know how dangerous it is, but what I feel in my gut is that not being here, not doing that, that's dangerous, right? As the IT guy, you don't want to get hacked and get in trouble or lose your job. But as the technology guy, if we fall behind, you lose your job. So, all right. So we're running out of time here, but not nearly enough focus on the service. And I throw this Howard Schultz quote, Starbucks is not in the selling coffee with a side of service business. We're in the selling service with a side of coffee business. They train their employees on that. And it's beaten into their heads. We are selling a service. And that service breeds habit, right? You go to Starbucks out of habit and a kind of a desire, a need for coffee. But you're buying service. You can get coffee at a lot of places. And this is the other one. Stop talking about ROI. Okay, when sales guy says ROI, my ears shut off. It's, small and medium-sized companies, we make decisions based on risk, right? What's the likelihood it's going to work? What's the likelihood it's not going to work? That's my core thing. And, okay, well, now that I've assessed the risk, what's the opportunity cost? If it works, what am I not doing for it to work? If it doesn't work, what am I not doing? I mean, that's how you make a decision. ROI comes later. That's usually how we all justify it to ourselves. And then last one, if I were you, and I know this is not easy, but demos, mock-ups, high-end demos sell. Steve Jobs was a huge proponent of the pixel-perfect demo. It's hard to allay the risk component with for the guys with the money if they can't see it, right? But if you can get them excited, if it looks awesome, if it looks like it's going to work, you can get there. If I were you, I'd offer to put an expert on the ground in the customer's facility for a week or so. If someone had done that for us, we would have done CFD 5 years ago, right? The problem is, okay, I'm going to spend all this money, put it on the ground, and then what? Right? And I look at that and say, as the customer, I'd happily pay for his flight, his hotel, whatever. I mean, your costs can be quite low. You're paying him anyway. But if he could actually just be in my facility and hang out in a conference room for a week, the barrier to entry just drops order of magnitude. So, and then lastly, that it is the gateway drug, right? Once you have a solution, the customer will need more. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're selling. It is worth it. I had one of the CFD providers, not the one that we're using, early on, said, well, we only do demos for 7 days because, if we put it on the ground and, what if you just want to run it for one thing? I said, well, if that's all you see in your product, that I just want to run it one time on one thing and be done with it, then what interest do I have in your product anyway? It can't be that good, right? If it's good, I'll want to run it all the time. Thank you.